asylum was barely visible under the thick veil of mist that clung to the air like a living thing. The night was still, unnervingly so, as if the world had stopped breathing the moment they crossed the rusted iron gates. The air carried a damp chill, the scent of old wood and decay lingering with an almost suffocating weight. Dames adjusted the strap of his backpack, his camera tucked tightly against his chest. "Looks even worse in person," he muttered, his breath curling into the cold. Beside him, Claire exhaled softly, her eyes scanning the towering silhouette of the abandoned building ahead. "I told you we should have waited till daylight," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice, just quiet dread. They had come here to uncover a mystery long buried, to document the asylum's forgotten past. It was a place whispered, but in town, a place that had swallowed secrets whole, closed for over 100 years. No official records detailed the reason for its abrupt shutdown. Only rumors remained, stories of missing patients, locked wings. A doctor whose name had been erased from history. The building loomed before them, its facade cracked and weathered, windows like hollowed-out eyes staring down in eerie silence. The wind stirred, threading through the skeletal trees, carrying a sound that might have been a whisper, or maybe it was nothing at all. Dames glanced at Claire. "You hear that?" She hesitated before shaking her head, but her fingers curled tighter around her flashlight. The front door stood slightly ajar, gaping just enough to reveal darkness beyond. Not the welcoming kind, the kind that felt as though it was waiting. James took a slow step forward. Something shifted inside, a faint scuffing noise, a presence felt, not seen. Claire swallowed. "James, maybe we shouldn't," but it was too late. The door creaked ever so slightly, as if inviting them in. The heavy wooden doors groaned in protest as James pushed them open, their rusted hinges screeching through the silence. The air inside was stagnant, thick with the scent of damp wood and something older, something forgotten. Dust hung in the air like a mist of decay, disturbed by their hesitant steps onto the crumbling tile floor. The temperature dropped instantly, a stark contrast to the mild autumn chill outside. It wasn't just cold, it was the kind of cold that seeped into the bones, clinging to the skin like unseen hands. Claire hesitated in the doorway, her flashlight's beam slicing through the darkness, revealing warped furniture draped and torn, sheets, patient files scattered across the floor, and hallways that stretched endlessly into the abyss. The wind howled through a broken window at the end of the corridor, rattling the loose panes like tapping fingers. James took a slow step forward, the sound of his own breathing too loud in the vast emptiness. His footsteps echoed, the noise bouncing off the walls unnaturally, as though the space itself was mimicking him. The faintest rustling came from deep within the building, distant yet unmistakable, like fabric shifting or footsteps dragging along the ground. He glanced at Claire, but she only tightened her grip on the flashlight. The forgotten nurse's station stood to the left, its desk warped with age. Papers on it yellowed and curling. A single chair lay overturned beside it. The clock mounted above the station had stopped at 2:17, its hands frozen in place as if time itself had abandoned the asylum long ago. Claire trailed her fingers along the edge of the desk, dust rising beneath her touch. "This place feels wrong." Her voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it seemed to carry through the hall like a breath against the walls. James forced a smirk, though his fingers twitched against his camera. "It's just an old building." His words lacked confidence, his voice betraying the unease creeping in. He pulled his camera up and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the room in a brief burst of white light, revealing more than expected faint handprints smudged against the peeling wallpaper. Too high to belong to a child, too small to be a man's. Claire's flashlight flickered. She tapped it against her palm, muttering under her breath. The beam steadied, but the unease settled deeper. A door down the hall stood slightly open, its dark interior beckoning. James moved toward it, drawn in by curiosity, but the closer he got, the more he noticed subtle scratches along the frame, as though someone had clawed at it from the inside. His breath came slower, heavier. From behind, Claire's voice was sharp but hushed. "Did you hear that?" James stopped. The silence stretched between them, thick and oppressive. Then a soft creak, a door closing. But they hadn't touched anything. James turned toward the sound, but there was nothing, just empty space and flickering shadows stretching longer than they should. The air felt charged, as if something unseen had just moved past them. Claire took a step closer to him, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think we're alone. The darkness ahead seemed to shift. A draft stirred the dust along the floor. Yet the air remained heavy, unmoving. The asylum had been abandoned for over a century, yet something inside still breathed. James took another cautious step into the dimly lit corridor, his breath visible in the icy air. His fingers twitched around the camera, pulse steady but alert. The atmosphere felt different, now heavier, like stepping into a space that had been waiting for them. The silence wasn't empty, it felt watchful. Claire followed closely, her flashlight beam dancing along the walls. The paint peeled away in jagged strips, revealing layers of time long since buried. Faded notices still clung to bulletin boards, their ink smudged and illegible. A rusted gurney stood against the wall, its once white sheets stained a deep brown. Brittle with age, the sight sent a ripple of unease through her. James turned into a side room, a former patient's quarters judging by the sparse furnishings. A single bed frame sat rusted against the wall, its mattress long gone. A wooden chair was toppled in the corner, its seat broken, but it was the desk that caught his eye. Unlike the rest of the room, it looked disturbed. Dust covered nearly everything in the asylum, undisturbed for decades. Yet this desk bore fresh streaks where something had been moved recently. His pulse quickened. He ran a hand over the surface, feeling the uneven grooves of old. Carvings, names, no, just scratches, desperate, erratic markings. His fingers traced over them, feeling their depth, their aggression. Claire's flashlight flickered again. She tapped it absently, muttering under her breath. James, what is that? His eyes followed her beam of light to the corner of the desk. Something jutted out from a narrow gap between the drawers, a folded piece of parchment. Yellowed and brittle at the edges, he reached for it, pausing just as his fingertips brushed the surface. A whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. Not from Claire. He yanked his hand back, heart pounding. The air seemed to thicken. He glanced at her, searching her face for confirmation, but she only frowned, confused. You heard that too, right? His voice came out steadier than he felt. Claire hesitated, her eyes flicking to the paper. I don't know. Maybe the wind. There was no wind. Slowly, he reached again, grasping the parchment between careful fingers and pulling it free. It was stiff with age, its edges crumbling. A faint metallic scent clung to its iron in decay. As he unfolded it, letters scrawled in deep ink greeted him. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. They won't let me leave. The truth is buried, and I am with it. If you find this, you must. The writing cut off abruptly. The last stroke smeared. Claire's stomach tightened. This doesn't feel right. James turned the paper over, his fingers brushing against something rough on the back. He lifted the flashlight closer, illuminating the faint imprint of a handprint smaller than his, darker than ink. It hadn't faded entirely. The edges blurred as if someone had pressed their palm against it long ago. A sudden creak echoed from the hall. Claire spun around, light sweeping over the doorway, empty. James shoved the note into his pocket, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. He moved to the desk, pulling open the drawer where the paper had been wedged, but would groan, resisting after years of neglect. Inside, scattered documents lay in disarray, pages curling with age. One stood out thicker, paper folded and sealed with a wax emblem still intact. He picked it up, tilting it toward the light. The emblem was unremarkable, a simple circular seal, but beneath it was a name etched into the wax. Dr. Elijah Hartley. Claire exhaled sharply. That name was on the door we passed earlier. The office. James nodded, gripping the letter tighter. Someone didn't want this found. Another sound, a shift in the air, a whisper, closer this time. Not the wind. Claire reached for his arm. We shouldn't be here. James swallowed, forcing his voice steady. We were meant to find this. The hallway behind them groaned, the floorboards stretching like something unseen had stepped forward. The asylum wasn't just abandoned. It was listening. The air inside the asylum grew heavier, pressing against James and Claire as they stepped back into the corridor. The letter, still sealed with the wax, felt warm in James' pocket, as though it carried something more than forgotten words. Neither spoke as they moved, their footsteps muffled by years of dust and decay. The silence wrapped around them, thick and unnatural. A soft thud echoed from somewhere above. Claire stiffened, gripping her flashlight tighter. James glanced at the ceiling, eyes narrowing. The second floor had been silent since they arrived, untouched by even the stray rodents that usually claimed abandoned places. Another sound, This time, it was closer, like something shifting, dragging just beyond their line of sight. James exhaled slowly, keeping his voice even. Could be a draft. Claire didn't answer. Her gaze flickered toward a door ahead, its surface warped. With time, she reached for the handle, hesitating. The brass knob was cold, unnaturally so. With a quiet breath, she turned it. The door opened an inch on its own. James stepped forward, nudging it wider. The room beyond was small, barren except for an overturned chair and a rusted bed frame. A cracked mirror hung on the far wall, its surface smeared with dust and something darker at the edges. Claire stepped inside cautiously, running her light along the walls. Her breath hitched. The dust on the floor bore no footprints. The room had been undisturbed for years. Behind them, the door groaned as it slowly swung shut. James turned sharply, grabbing the handle before it could close completely. The metal vibrated under his grip, faintly trembling as if something on the other side resisted. He pulled it open with force, stepping back into the hallway. The corridor was empty. A quiet knock sounded from somewhere to their left. Claire flinched, her flashlight beam jerking toward the sound. Nothing. Then a whisper, soft but distinct, curling through the air. "You shouldn't be here." James swallowed hard. His pulse pounded in his ears. "You heard that?" Claire nodded, her fingers tight around the flashlight. A slow, deliberate creak echoed from the far end of the hall. Both turned in unison. The door to Dr. Elijah Hartley's office was slightly ajar now, though neither had touched it. The shadows beyond it stretched unnaturally, as if the darkness had deepened in just that space. James squared his shoulders, trying to shake the chill crawling up his spine. "We came to find answers." Claire hesitated but followed. The distance to the office seemed longer now, the hallway stretching with every step. The door waited, open just enough to invite them inside. James pushed it fully open. The office was eerily intact, unlike the other rooms they'd seen. Books lined the shelves, their spines cracked but still standing in order. A desk sat in the center, its wooden surface covered in papers, neatly arranged as though abandoned in the middle of work. Claire stepped in first, trailing a finger over the desk surface. No dust, no decay. "It's like," she murmured, voice barely above. A whisper, like someone was just here. James knelt by a filing cabinet, pulling at one of the drawers. It resisted at first, then slid open with a reluctant creak. Old patient files stacked in neat rows, each marked with handwritten dates. He pulled one out. The paper was crisp, the ink too fresh for something that should have been left untouched for decades. Before he could read it, something moved in the reflection of the cracked window. James snapped his head up. The figure was indistinct, a shape standing just outside the room, lingering in the hallway. His stomach dropped. Claire turned. "What?" He met her eyes, voice low. "We're not alone." The lights flickered, the air shifted, the door slammed shut behind them. The room plunged into darkness. The last flicker of light from James' flashlight vanished as the bulb shattered with a soft pop, leaving only Claire's trembling beam to cut through the suffocating blackness. The air was thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves had begun to breathe. James' pulse pounded in his ears. He reached for the door, fingers fumbling over the handle. It wouldn't budge. "Claire, help me," he whispered. Voice strained. She was already there, her free hand yanking at the knob. It didn't move, locked by something unseen. Her breath came quick and uneven. A whisper drifted through the room, slow and deliberate. James, his name curled through the air, soft and intimate, like a breath against his ear. He recoiled, spinning toward the voice, but nothing was there. The room stretched in shadows, the desk looming like a forgotten relic of the past. Claire let out a sharp gasp. James turned in time to see the bookshelves tremble. A single book slid from its place, tumbling to the floor with a dull thud, then another, and another. The sound filled the space, relentless, like impatient fingers drumming against wood. James forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, but his body wasn't listening. His fingers tingled, his skin cold. Something was here. Claire took a shaky step back, her flashlight flickering against the desk. Papers that had once been neatly stacked were now scattered, pages curling at the edges as if something unseen had rifled through them. Then the footsteps started, soft at first, slow, a measured rhythm against the creaking wooden floor just outside the door. They stopped directly in front of it. Neither James nor Claire moved, their breath frozen in their chests. A knock. 1, 2, 3. The sound reverberated through the room, almost polite. Almost patient, Claire's grip tightened around his arm. "Who's there?" she managed, though her voice barely carried silence. Then a scrape. Something dragged along the wood, tracing the outline of the doorframe from top to bottom. The sound coiled around them, setting their nerves alight. James clenched his fists, forcing himself to speak. "This isn't real. It's just old air moving through the walls." The lights flickered back on. For a moment, everything was still. Then the door burst open. The force sent Claire stumbling back, her flashlight clattering to the ground. James barely caught himself, spinning toward the doorway. It was empty. The hallway stretched before them, untouched by time. No figures, no movement, only the distant echo of something retreating into the dark. James grabbed Claire's arm. "We're leaving," she didn't argue. As they stepped out, the hallway shifted. The walls felt closer. The air thicker, like the asylum itself had begun to close in. Their footsteps seemed muffled, swallowed by the silence. The whispers returned, threading through the air like static. "Don't go." James quickened his pace. The main corridor was just ahead. They only needed to reach the exit. Then Claire stopped. Her breath hitched. Her flashlight had landed at an angle when it fell, its beam illuminating the end of the hallway, and in it a figure stood. It wasn't moving, just watching. James barely breathed. The figure was wrong, its shape blurred at the edges, like it didn't belong in the space it occupied. Claire's fingers dug into his wrist. "James." The figure took a step forward. James grabbed her hand and ran. The air thickened as James and Claire stumbled through the dim corridor, the oppressive silence pressing against their ears. Their breaths came in short gasps, their bodies tense, as if expecting the walls themselves to shift and close, and around them the figure had vanished. But its presence lingered and echoed in the air, a weight neither of them could shake. James' fingers tightened around Claire's wrist as they moved, forcing themselves deeper into the asylum rather than toward the exit. The rational part of his mind screamed for them to leave, but the pull of unfinished truths was stronger. Something had been waiting, guiding them here. Claire's flashlight flickered against the peeling walls, casting long, wavering shadows. The hallway stretched ahead, and at its end a door stood slightly ajar. Unlike the others, this one was untouched by time, its wood smooth, unblemished by rot. A whisper, too soft to make out, drifted from within. They hesitated. James took a breath, steeling himself, then pushed the door open. The room was pristine, unlike the rest of the asylum. There was no dust, no decay. A wooden desk sat in the center, untouched by age. Papers stacked neatly atop it. Against the far wall, a single chair faced them, as if someone had just risen from it moments ago. Claire swallowed. "This isn't possible." James stepped forward, his pulse hammering. He reached for the papers, fingers trembling as he lifted the top sheet. The ink was fresh. A name stared back at him in bold, dark script. Dr. Elias Caldwell, the asylum's head physician, the one who had overseen hundreds of patients before the facility abruptly shut down, the one who had vanished without a trace. Claire moved beside him, scanning the documents. Patient records, all signed by Caldwell's hand. But as she flipped through them, her hand stilled. A single page had been marked with a deep red stain, its edges curling slightly. She turned it over. James leaned in, reading the words aloud. "Experiment. Successful. Subject remains compliant. Memory suppression sustained. No remaining witnesses." The words sat heavily between them, sinking into the air like a stone dropped into dark water. The asylum hadn't simply housed the ill. It had been a site for something else. A loud creak sounded behind them. Claire spun, the beam of her flashlight, catching the reflection of a mirror hanging on the wall, one they hadn't noticed before. But it wasn't their reflection staring back. A figure stood within the glass, its hollow eyes locked onto them. It was him. Dr. Caldwell. Not dead, not gone. James stumbled back, knocking over a stack of papers. "We need to go," he whispered, the weight of the revelation choking his breath. Claire hesitated, her gaze flicking between the mirror and the desk. But the patients, whatever happened to them, it wasn't just neglect. It was something else. The asylum wasn't shut down. It was erased. Another whisper, this time clear. "Don't let them see." The air shifted. The room grew colder. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water, and the reflection of Caldwell moved, but the room itself remained still. James grabbed Claire's arm. Now they turned, pushing through the doorway as the mirror's surface shattered. The hallway twisted ahead of them, the walls warping as if something unseen had awoken. No longer content with watching, Claire's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The missing records, the sealed rooms, the whispers that the asylum had been used for something unspeakable. Not just experiments, but erasure. Something had gone wrong, and it was still here. The asylum loomed behind them, its towering silhouette swallowing the moonlight. As James and Claire stumbled through the overgrown courtyard, their breaths came in ragged gasps, but neither dared to slow down. The whispers had stopped, the shifting shadows had faded, but the weight of unseen eyes still pressed against their backs. The moment they crossed the rusted gate, an unnatural silence fell over the air. The wind that had howled through the trees now stood still. The world beyond the asylum seemed untouched, unaffected, as if nothing had ever happened. Claire turned back. The building looked different now, almost peaceful in its decay, its dark windows vacant, holding no sign of what they had just endured. James swallowed hard. Did we? His voice trailed off, uncertain if they had escaped or if the asylum had simply decided to let them go. A distant creak echoed from within, not a groan of an old structure settling, but footsteps. Deliberate, measured. Claire took a step back. It's not over. James held out the files. They had taken the only evidence of what had been hidden within those walls. The papers felt lighter. He flipped through them, fingers tightening as he realized what was missing. Dr. Caldwell's name. The records were intact, the descriptions of the experiments still there, but every signature, every mention of the doctor had been erased, like he had never existed. A chill crawled up Claire's spine. It doesn't want us to tell the truth. James looked up at the asylum one last time. A single window on the top floor glowed faintly, as though someone or something stood watching them, ensuring their silence. The wind picked up again, whispering through the trees. Don't let them see. James dropped the files. The pages scattered, like dead leaves swallowed by the night. Without another word, they turned away, leaving the asylum behind. It had let them go, but it would not let them forget. And somewhere inside, the shadows shifted, waiting for the next soul curious enough to return.